What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, we are now beginning our coverage over Fatal Attractions, the actual crossover. Now, technically, we already covered the first chapter of Fatal Attractions, and that chapter was more of X-Factor just kind of dealing with their own things. But when it comes to the rest of Fatal Attractions, the rest of the chapters really go together, tell an overall story of the X-Men, X-Force, and also Excalibur a tad bit there at the end, kind of dealing with Magneto and his new plan for the mutant race. Now, in today's video, we're only covering the X-Force chapter of Fatal Attractions, where you have our heroes learn of the return of Magneto, but also what Magneto has done to Cable's old base, the Gray Malkin. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. Now, this chapter does take place in X-Force issue number 25. Now, getting into the opening page of this issue, this chapter of Fatal Attractions, we actually pick up with somebody looking at this computer screen of all the different characters who are connected to Charles Xavier in some kind of way. X-Force, X-Factor, and the X-Men. And so apparently this person wants to make an offer to the children of Charles Xavier. But apparently the second generation of children of Charles Xavier. And you see what I mean about that statement here in a moment, but we then jump over to X-Force. And so when we pick up with X-Force, they are just arriving back at home from another mission. Now, when it comes to our heroes, unfortunately, every single time they come back home after doing a mission, they run into another mission or some kind of other situation. And so when our heroes come back to Camp Verde, they believe that they're going to have some downtime. They are going to actually be able to relax, except you didn't have Pharaoh say, we can't relax, guys. There's somebody here. And that person, he's been around the entire camp doing something. And so we have to be on guard. Now remember, by this point in our coverage over X-Force, Cable is no longer the actual leader of the team because thanks to the Executioner's song, he had disappeared at the end of that crossover. And so Cannonball has now been the leader of the actual team. Either way, you do have Cannonball tell the rest of X-Force to go ahead and split up, but to also be careful, but also find the person who has now entered their home without any kind of permission. And so when it comes to X-Force, they have broken up into teams of 2. Now, most of the team, they are taken out very easily by this person who has invaded their home. Now, this person, it does seem like he knows the team very well. The way he is moving, the way he knows when to attack them, how to take them down. He is able to take out teams left and right. But then it comes down to the last 2 members of X-Force that he has to take down. Now, the last 2 members of X-Force to not be taken out was Cannonball and also Boom Boom. Now, you have Cannonball being able to actually sneak up on this person from behind to use his powers on them. Now, after doing that, we do learn who was the person kind of sneaking around Camp Verde and being able to take out the different members of the team. And that would be no other than Cable. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense because most of the team of X-Force was around when Cable was around. He's been there with them and he has studied them up and down. He knows all the good and bad about each of these characters. So it kind of makes sense that he'll be the one to actually be able to take down most of the team. Now, we can't forget that when it comes to Cable, most of the team actually did like the guy, except for 2 people. That will be Sunspot and also Richter. Now, for Richter, we were left to believe in the possibility that Cable was the one who had killed off Richter's father in the past, because that's the reason why Richter hates Cable so much for. But we learned that that's not technically true, that it wasn't really Cable who killed off the father of Richter. It was actually Strife. And remember, Strife looks just like Cable. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, they don't know that Strife is actually the clone of Cable. Right now, they think it's the other way around, where Cable is actually the clone of Strife. Either way, you did have Cable say, it wasn't me, it was Strife. And also Sunspot, I was not the one who killed off your father, it was actually Gideon. And so it's Cable saying, listen, it's time for you guys to stop hating on me and try to work with me. Now, something else we have to remember is the whole idea that after Cable had disappeared at the end of the Executioner Song event, Cannonball had to take over the team. Now, when he did, for Cannonball, he was a great leader, but it was a lot for him to take up when he's just a young boy. He's still in his early, I want to say young adult days. Maybe like 18 or 19. Either way, for Cable, he hates the idea that he had disappeared at the end of the Executioner Song and kind of leaving Cannonball in charge of X-Force. It was a lot for him to actually handle. But at the same time, for Cable, he looks at Cannonball and the rest of X-Force as his children. Now, at first, when he was the leader of the New Mutants and also X-Force, he looked at them as soldiers. But then he realized that these are kids, not soldiers. They're not machines, they're actual people. And so that changed for him, and he began to look at them as well his children. He became a father to these characters. And so for Cable, he realized that he left a lot for Cannonball to take up after he had disappeared. And he wants to make sure that Cannonball is okay. Like, how is he? Not just physically, but also mentally. And you have the two characters come together. And it kind of shows that father and son relationship, even though they're not technically father and son. Now, you do have some time pass by where apparently you have most of the members of X-Force being kicked outside so that Cannonball and also Cable and a couple of other people at X-Force are able to have a conversation with one another in private. Now, for Richter, he hates the idea that he's one of the ones that got kicked out of the actual meeting. He feels like that everybody should be part of the actual meeting. Now, you do have Shatterstar trying his best to understand that sometimes your leaders need to have that private convo when it comes to planning out things for the future of the team. And sometimes those soldiers are not going to be involved in those plannings. And so for Richter, he hates the idea that he's just not involved in those meetings. And really, it's not one of those meetings at all. Instead, it's really more of Cable and Cannonball and a few other people coming together to figure out if there is a way to save the life of Skid and also Firefist. I don't know why I said save the life, but really more of fixing their brains. And let me explain. You see, these two characters, they were also part of the New Mutants at the very tail end of the run of New Mutants leading into X-Force. They were really part of X-Factor at the very beginning of the original team of X-Factor. They were trainees for the original team, who then moved on over to the New Mutants. Either way, when it came to Skid and Firefist, they were actually captured by Strife and brainwashed to work for him. And so right now, you have Cable and really everyone else in that room just trying to find the best way to fix their brains, to bring those two characters back over to their side. Now for Sunspot, and really Cannonball as well, especially Cannonball, he still cannot trust Cable. He wants to know the full story of Cable. Now, when it comes to Cable, when he does give us this quick origin story, it's only like small details, and really later books down the road is going to give us some more information about the actual character. But for right now, all we know is that for Nathan Dayspring, that's his real name, he was brought into the future by a woman known as the Ascani. Now, when it came to her, she believed that he could be used as a way to be their savior, to save that dark future that was created by Apocalypse. The problem was him and his crew, they had failed in the war. They lost the war against Apocalypse and his people. And so you had Cable go back in time to try to prevent that future from actually happening. But he also believed that Cannonball would be the best person to kind of use to help prevent that future from actually happening. And the reason why, because for Cannonball, he's one of the few people to be trained by both Charles Xavier, but also Magneto. The problem was that for Cable, when he came back in time, so did Strife. And that kind of ruined his entire plan. And so he tells all of that over to Cannonball and the rest of X-Force, who's also in the room with them. And they're kind of like, oh, that's a lot. And it does seem like you're telling the truth here. Now, because Cable has traveled so much in the time stream, he does not actually know what is the actual future for the main Marvel universe. All he knows is that he came from a future where Apocalypse had basically ruled. Now, with all that being said, you did have Cable say, listen, it seems like we have an intruder at your base, so let's go outside and see who is this unknown person trying to attack the base. Now, once everybody get outside, they realize that they're being confronted by Exodus. Now, when it comes to Exodus, this is not his first time appearing in our coverage. And matter of fact, he first appeared in the first chapter of Fatal Attractions. Now, in that first chapter, he just flew by X Factor and went on with his day. We had no idea who he was. But now, this is the starting point in our coverage over the X-Men where we are going to learn more about the actual character Exodus. And really, we're going to learn that he has a range of different kinds of powers under his belt. And so over our coverage over the X-Men, we are going to learn about a lot of different powers this one character truly has. Now, the reason why he is here is to actually make an offer over to X-Force, to have them join him over to a place he calls heaven. Now, really, he's not here for the entire team. He's only here for two people, Cannonball and also Sunspot. And the reason why, because he believes if he takes them back over to his place, this place called heaven, and they like the place, then maybe, just maybe, the rest of X-Force will actually join them on this place called heaven. And so you have Cannonball and Sunspot kind of down with the idea of going with them, but at the same time, they don't want to go alone. And he says, listen, if we go with you, we got to bring everybody who is part of the New Mutants. Now remember, when it came to the New Mutants, the original series led into X-Force, but at the tail end of that series was when you had Cable take over the team. Now, when he did, over time, we saw different members of the New Mutants begin to leave and new characters came in to replace them to make up X-Force. And so right now, you have all the characters on X-Force who were part of the New Mutants going with Exodus over to this place called Heaven, while the rest of the team stayed behind. So you have like Richter, Sunspot, Boom Boom, Cannonball, Skid, and also Fire Fist. Now the last two characters, they're only going because Exodus believes that his master can actually cure the mind of both Fire Fist and Skid. Now, before you have Cannonball leave, he walks over to Cable. And the reason why? To give Cable a tracking device. To give Cable and his team the ability to track down Cannonball and his team as they all leave with Exodus. And so just like that, they're all gone to this place supposedly called Heaven. Now, when our heroes arrive at this place supposedly called Heaven, they realize that this is actually the Gray Malkin, but apparently the Gray Malkin has been repaired. Now, if you saw our earlier videos when it comes to X-Force, you would know that X-Force had, well, really Cannonball, had no choice but to go ahead and blow up the Gray Malkin, the old base that belonged to Cable. Now remember, when it comes to Gray Malkin, it is Cable's base, but the reason why it's so special because it was the thing he brought with him when he traveled from the future back into the past. And he thought he lost the Gray Malkin when he came back to the past again, hearing that it had blown up. But in our last video, we saw somebody being able to rebuild the Gray Malkin. Now, honestly, we already know it is Magneto, but for our heroes, they begin to realize that yes, they're on the Gray Malkin, but somebody was able to actually rebuild it. Now, they are confronted by somebody who's hiding underneath a robe. We already know it's Magneto, like the last video showed Magneto. But you do have Magneto go out of his way to fix the mind of both Fire Fist and Skid. And so right now, they're back to normal again. No longer brainwashed by strife. Now, like we saw earlier, when it came to Cannonball, he gave Cable the ability to actually track them where they went to. And so you had Cable being able to get an aircraft that could actually travel into space. And when they do, you have Cable find out what has happened, that somebody has rebuilt the Gray Malkin. Now, for Cable, he has no idea it's Magneto, but us, the readers, we already know it is Magneto. But either way, for Cable, he hates the idea to see his home, his old home, now being used or possibly going to be used against him, but also possibly could be a home for the mutant race. Now, there is a reason why I'm saying a home for the mutant race, and I'll explain why here in a moment, but getting back over to Cannonball and his team, you have Magneto realize that, hey, listen, there seemed to be some kind of intruder here. And it looks like it's Cable and his team, so I'm kind of confused how they got here. And you have Cannonball say, hey, it was me. I had a tracker on me. They followed the tracker, and now they are here. Now, for Magneto, he's very impressed in what Cannonball has done. And really, it kind of shows that Magneto realized that Cannonball has grown up. He's no longer that young child he took in back in the New Mutant days. But getting back over to Cable's team, we do see that Cable's team has arrived at the Gray Malkin. Now, for Cable, he has a game plan here. He wants to hack into the Gray Malkin. And the reason why, because he wants to teleport. He wants to body slide. Now, remember, the Gray Malkin gives Cable the ability to teleport across the entire world, but also on the Gray Malkin. It's called body sliding. Either way, for Cable, he wants to hack into the Gray Malkin, but also hack into the Professor. Now remember, the Professor is the AI system that helped Cable control the Gray Malkin, but he has no idea the Professor has been infected by new alien tech that Magneto has uploaded into the Professor's program. Either way, for Cable, he was able to teleport over to where Cannonball and his team is actually at. Well, really, before you have Cable being able to actually teleport over to where Cannonball and his team is at, you do have our heroes fight against Exodus. And really, that battle is short-lived. And the only reason why, because, well, you have Cable being able to actually teleport them over to where Cannonball is at and get away, far away from Exodus. Now, like I said a moment ago, when it came to Magneto, he's calling his new base the Avalon, but like I said, he's trying to make this place be more like the heaven for the mutant race, and Earth is the hell for the mutant race. Let me explain. Because for Magneto, he realized that if mutants try to stay on Earth, then most likely they are going to be hunted down. They are going to be killed off by the human race. So why should they stay down there on Earth in a place that's like hell? When they come over to the Avalon and live in a place that's like heaven. And so it's Magneto saying, why don't you guys stay here with me? A better place for the mutant race. Now for Skid and Fire Fist, they had decided to go ahead and stay on Avalon. And the reason why, because Magneto had fixed their mind. They're kind of like, hey, listen, he fixed our mind, but also he's kind of right. Why don't we just go ahead and stay here on Avalon? It's basically heaven for the mutant race. Now for Cable, he's kind of like, y'all are children. Y'all don't fully understand what Magneto choices could possibly do to the mutant race down the road. But it's really more Cannonball saying, no, you don't understand, Cable. Like, we don't have the right to force people to do what we want them to do. They have their own free will. They can make their own choices. If Skid and Fire Fist want to stay here, they can do that. Now for Cable, he hates hearing that from Cannonball. But Cable's like, listen, my main goal right now is to get rid of the Gray Malkin. I want to blow it up. I hate the idea it's right now in Magneto's hand. But also, I want to download my AI system, the Professor, and get the heck out of here. And so, he basically forced body slide the entire X-Force team on the aircraft that he used to get over here to the Gray Malkin, or the Avalon is what Magneto is calling it now. And then he runs away to hopefully achieve his goal to blow up Avalon, but to download the professor. Now, while you have Cable trying to achieve these goals, he's then confronted by Magneto. Now, for Magneto, it was more of like, listen, I was not trying to battle you here. And matter of fact, I was just trying to give or build a safe haven for the mutant race away from the human race who hate us so much. But here you are right now trying to bring me down. Now, for Cable, it's more of like, listen, I have been through the timeline so many times that I have seen what happens when you have decided to do things for the mutant race. It causes so many problems for the mutant race. I have seen it over and over and over again in the timeline. And so, yes, if I had to stop you here and now to save the lives of future mutants down the road, then I'm going to do it here and now. But here's the problem, though. Half the body of Cable is metal. So for Magneto, it's just like, there you go. Listen, you tried, but listen, dude, I'm Magneto. I'm on a whole different level. You're like here, I'm up here. There's no way you thought that you could actually defeat me. But then you have Cable still being able to teleport away, to body slide the heck out of there, but at least he was able to get the professor. Now, for Magneto, he realized that he wasn't really able to recruit enough members of X-Force. Now, remember, in the earlier parts of this video, I had mentioned the fact that for Magneto, he called the New Mutants or X-Force the second generation. And the reason why, because, well, they were the second team for the X-Men after Uncanny X-Men. When it came to Chris Claremont, the Uncanny X-Men were more adults, but then later on he introduced the New Mutants who were young teenagers, the second generation. But either way, for Magneto, he's kind of like, listen, I was not really able to get more members of X-Force, but now it's time for me to try to recruit the other members of the X-Men, the first generation of the mutant race that works under Charles Xavier. And so now is him saying it's time for him to go after Uncanny X-Men. And that leads into the bigger moments of Fatal Attractions. But with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But also, guys, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.